Hi, and welcome to A Time to Thrill. It's me, your host, Amy Austin. This month, I have the joy of speaking with Dee J Adams. I feel like DJ is one of those people who has many jobs, as we will discuss during the podcast. Okay, so obviously, I met her as an author. She published romantic suspense for Carina Press, which at the time was, oh my God, like 15 years ago, was a new Harlequin ebook only imprint, um, which changed a little bit later. Some authors got print through Harlequin, some did not. That's a whole other conversation, because it was during that era where ebooks took off. Let's see. And I have so many thoughts and feelings about Carina Press, but we'll not get into that. So DJ also, in addition, is an actor. She's in voiceover work. I think she's done her own audiobooks. We will find out. And is a dialogue and acting coach for television. So I, so I met her maybe, oh my God, my child's 14, maybe 15 years ago, a little bit earlier than that, in the Los Angeles romance writers group. Back then during the day, we used to get together at Borders, which is no longer in business, and talk about writing, selling our writing successes, and the business of being an author. Also, this is so odd. She and I shared a PO box for probably 10 years. At some point, I got a PO box so that I could get mail without it coming to my house and business stuff without it coming to my house. And given the exorbitant cost of PO boxes in LA, we shared one. I think you could have up at that time up to 5 business names or something on it. And so that's what we did. Um, so I've been to her house picking up mail randomly, and I think the same can be said of her. She's actually the first person I knew who has a ring doorbell, had a ring doorbell. Okay, this is so random. None of that's important. I think the reason I wanted to talk to DJ, like I'm writing a new book, and I was thinking about, I'm writing a new book that actually takes place in LA. And I haven't done that in quite a while. All of the romances I wrote as Jolie Moore, most of them I think take place in Los Angeles. I think two don't. Um, but okay, maybe four don't. I'm sorry, I'm thinking about it off the top of my head. But I did write about Los Angeles contemporaneously. But all of the Casey Court and Nicole Long books primarily take place in Cleveland, Ohio, and in the past, since I'm writing this linear time that started in the 90s. And I think in the book I'm maybe up to 2010. So this is the first time in a long time I have written about the present. So I have to shift my focus like 15 years ahead, which is, the present, um, to write a book that takes place where I am now. And it's sort of interesting because I really think about Los Angeles as taking place in the past. I think of everything taking place in the past, and I don't often write about the present. Oh my God, I just meandered off and I don't even know how I started talking about this. Okay, I got it. So I was writing, and I was thinking one of the characters in my new book, since she lives in LA, is in the entertainment business. And I was thinking about all the jobs in the entertainment business of people I know and going through like different iterations so I could write this book, realistically. And DJ popped into my mind because she has been in this business. We'll talk about it. Oh my God, since the 80s, 90s. Oh, long time. And she's one of those people who's like a touchstone of what's currently going on in the business. She'll talk about it. She works on the TV show The Connors, and it's the job she has now. But her first job was actually working on Roseanne, which was the other iteration of this show. And it's sort of fascinating to have come full circle. But she's had like some of the most interesting stories about working on sets, and maybe we'll discuss some of those. She talks about working on kid shows, which is a whole thing now, especially with the documentaries. But at the time, she worked, I think, at Sunset Gower, and that's where they filmed. Oh my God, like those morning kid sitcoms, but before like Disney sort of took off and before Universal took off, there were like a lot of Nickelodeon shows over there. You know, teenagers, laugh tracks, that kind of thing. And she has some funny stories from that and actually wrote a book um, called Overheard on the Set, which we'll talk about, which sort of like encapsulates all the sort of crazy wackadoodle things people say in creative business, where people, I think, feel free to speak in a way that you wouldn't in like an office for like an insurance company or a bank or like a law firm or something like that. So I always find that interesting. So I was writing and I thought about her and I was like, oh my God, I got to talk to DJ. And as always, I dialed her up and she agreed. So to update you, I will say that the book, Her Last Mistress, the one that's coming out in January 2025, is done, 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 done. We're through the two editors. It will be ready, like done, done, in about a week, and then we'll get some advanced review copies out and about in the world. And I do want to thank all of you who volunteered to beta read the book this summer. I found it immensely helpful. It helped me sort of figure out exactly the story I wanted to tell. And I thank you so much and remain grateful. So the book comes out in January 2025. If you haven't pre-ordered it, please do. I'm really excited about the book being able to combine sort of three elements. One, psychological and social thriller, the same thing I've written about before, a little bit more psychological this time, but also has the point of view of both Nicole Long and Casey Court. So I, for once, not for once, I guess this has happened before, but I'm able to sort of give both their perspectives after having practiced in Cleveland at this point in their careers for 14, 15 years. They've been around the block and they all want the same thing, which is either bad people to stop doing what they're doing or bad people to be punished. And hopefully that everybody is satisfied at the end of this book. I certainly am. And I can't wait to share it with you, so pre-order now. I do want to flag that there were some issues with audio in the beginning because of DJ's internet connectivity, but it smooths out in the end. So without further ado, let's hear from DJ Adams. Hi, this is Amy Austin, and welcome to A Time to Thrill. This month, I have the joy of speaking with DJ Adams. Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
Be here. I'm good, and I'm so thrilled to be here. Thank you.
I'm so excited to talk to you. I haven't seen you in person in a while, though I did see you post-COVID. And the thing, I'm going to say this to you, it's so weird. You are, how can I say this? You're the first person I ever knew who had a Ring doorbell.
Really?
Yes. I remember driving up with my son. I don't know, maybe he was like 8, 9, 10 at the time. And he's like, what is this? I'm like, it's a Ring doorbell, but we'd never seen one like out in the wild. Everybody I know has one now, but I don't. But it was just like, we talked about it on the way home.
And did it scare you when you walked up? Because it scares the bejesus out of people when they walk up. They don't expect it and it says, you are being recorded. And it's like, ah.
Yours is the only one. I don't know if I'm trying to think. I feel like yours is the only one that talks, but mostly I go to people's parties and they've turned it off because otherwise it would be crazy. But it was just the talking, I think. And it was like, wow, okay, welcome.
Yeah, it's been recorded in my house. And of course, I got it after we were robbed. So that timing was poor. But yeah.
Yeah, I've been there, done that, and I still don't have a doorbell. I just got bars on the windows, but that's a different conversation for a different time. So I was thinking, I think I met you. I feel like I was pregnant, but probably like 20, let's see, my son's probably 2008, 2009.
Okay.
Because that's when I joined Lara, back when they had the meetings at Borders, in wherever that is,
When we
yeah. And so I was thinking about that. But so my first question is, let's go back. My first question is, when did you start writing?
I started writing, I want to say it was 2000. It could have been 2001. I know. Uh, I And it was weird how I started writing. I actually wiped out, this is a funny story, wiped out on the tennis court, blew out all the ligaments in my ankle on a gorgeous backhand, I might add. And um, I was completely laid up and could not walk. And I ended up going to my brother's place in San Diego. I'm getting ahead of myself. I was laid up and I had a dream one night and I was telling my husband about it. And he said, "Why don't you just write it down?" And I started writing it down from where the dream started. And then it ended. And then I had to go back to the beginning and create the beginning of this story. And that was the beginning. I'd never written anything, but I had all this time on my hands. And I don't even think I owned a computer then. I wrote 14 hours a day, 7 days a week for what I think 6 weeks, and I had 450 longhand pages. First novel,
Mm-hmm.
and that was it. And of course, that one is still under the bed and always will be, as were the next two. And then I wrote the fourth book, and that only took me 10 years to sell.
I think we all have that story. I mean, I think I started writing the first book in 1998 or something. So, many years passed, many, many years. So you had okay, my understanding of your background, and you can correct me, is that you had wanted to be an actor, or you are an actor, but that was what you wanted to do creatively. So had you never wanted to be a writer?
Never thought about writing, never a writer. I am dyslexic. I am kind of a mirror dyslexic. If it's a D, I'll write a B. If it's a Q, I'll write a G. Everything I do is just backwards. And so writing was never anything I thought I could do. Of course, when you're typing, it's a little easier because it's your brain doesn't tell your hand to go a certain way that's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, I never considered it. I mean, I wasn't terrible in English, but writing was just not something I ever considered myself doing. I mean, as an actor, I considered myself a storyteller because, you create a character and you want to bring this person to life that's on the page. And, what actors bring to a character isn't necessarily what a writer envisioned sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
um, which is a completely different subject. But yeah, no, I never considered writing, and it was very accidental for me.
So that's okay. So let me say this. Let's go back. Was your goal initially, let's say when you were younger, to be an actor in Los Angeles?
Those school plays, it was the very first time I got for anything, and I was maybe a freshman, and I got the lead.
Oh wow.
And oh, well, all right. I mean, I auditioned for it. I wanted it. There's nothing to do. And boy, I did that play, and hearing the applause, oh, I'm hooked.
Yeah, I've heard that from both actors and comedians. Like they're like, "Oh, I went out on stage and I saw the audience and I heard the applause, I heard the laughter, and I was like, I'm in."
Oh, you like that? You like? Okay, let's do more of that. So then I did a little bit. I did some community theater, and then I just did every school play I could get in on, and that's what I did. And that's when I knew that's what I wanted to do. Much
That's fascinating because I think that, let me say this, for most of the people I talk to who engage in a creative career, there's like a more or less a salient moment where you think to yourself, "Oh, this is what I want to do."
yeah.
whether or not that pays the bills is a whole separate issue, but there's that moment.
If I wasn't doing a job one day, I was doing one job. Um, and and it was hard. It was definitely hard, but uh, you know, it's it's something that I mean, my acting teacher from American Academy of Dramatic Art, and she is just turned 76, and she's retired from teaching, and she's getting the best acting work of her life right now. And she, along with teaching, that it's in her blood. It is, and that's how it is with a lot of people. And I still get the occasional gig every now and then, enough to get in, but yeah, it's not a rejection.
So I will say that I did, well, not your last job. I don't know what your last job is. I did watch the episode of The Connors that you did. I feel like, oh my God, now 8, 9, 10 months ago, um, a bit ago, because you had said you had done it, and I can manage Hulu enough to watch it. So I did see that. We'll get back to it. How can I say this? Given like your like all the choices in the world, would you do acting over everything, all the other creative pursuits that you have?
Oh, wow, that's a question, Amy. Would I do it over? Um, Possibly. I'm gonna say um, I hadn't I hadn't been in front of the camera in so long, and when I did that part, and I had a blast. But if you ask me if I remember a thing, it a whirlwind that week, just a whirlwind, and the best. But I didn't remember being petrified before when I was acting,
Mm-hmm.
and I think I've done it in so long, I had a curve that I didn't. So I think if I had, I don't know, I love it that I came before. I had a great. Um, if somebody offered me something, I would not turn it down. So maybe the answer is yes. Yes, I just have to get comfortable, get back in the saddle again to do it. You know,
Yeah. Yes.
I
Yeah.
sit down and write another book.
Yeah. It's the thing I was saying to you before I started recording about getting back into photography. It's interesting how you can have such a passion for something and it goes away, but there is a learning curve, unfortunately, to getting back into it. And photography may be its own thing because God knows the technology is so different than when I started and it was film. But it's interesting that things have changed, techniques have changed, things change, and nobody called me to tell me.
My daughter's a photographer, and her, keep up with all of the lenses and the camera body, the next new thing. It's an expensive career.
It really is. Let me just say, it was a very expensive hobby. And the time that I did headshots to offset the cost was a very short period of time compared to the amount of equipment that I have. So
Right.
let me ask you this. Okay, so when I met you, you were doing writing and you were doing the on-set coaching. So how did you go from acting yourself to doing coaching on set? Because I don't, most people I know have not made that leap. No, they're either acting or they're not, I think.
Right. So this is an interesting story.
Are you a creative looking for a new writing and reading podcast? Check out Dark Side of the Word, a weekly podcast for all the dark story lovers out there. Co-hosts Kate and CJ are two writers and bloggers who love to talk about their creative projects, their thoughts on that trending spooky story, how writing their latest novels is coming along, and much more. Each month's episodes are broken into 4 categories: writing updates from the trenches, content recaps, current events in the writing and publishing world, and a monthly book club that reads dark-themed books. All topics are dissected and discussed from a writer's perspective. Watch Dark Side of the Word on YouTube or listen to the audio-only version on iHeart, Apple, and Spotify.
In 1989, keep in mind I'm working multiple jobs. A friend of mine did a pilot called Roseanne as a stand-in, and she was not a stand-in usually. She was a assistant director, and she couldn't. So the show went to series, and she couldn't do it, and she gave them my name. She said, "Here, this girl can take my spot." And I was interviewed, and I got hired to be Roseanne's stand-in. I had not done it before, but I considered, I was an actor. I had been auditioning, and I had done a couple of commercials at that point. And I thought, well, this will get me on set. Who knows where to lead? And I was her stand-in. And the first 13 weeks of Roseanne were insane. We were a #1 show very quickly out of the gate. There were struggles of who was in charge. And after 13 weeks, and Roseanne had a dialogue coach. There were 2 dialogue coaches. John Goodman had one and Roseanne had one. And Roseanne's dialogue coach left after 13 weeks to go direct a show in New York. And they needed somebody to be her dialogue coach. And they were all petrified of her. All the execs were petrified. And they thought, well, this girl is her stand-in. She gives her notes. She talks to her. She has a relationship with her. Let's ask her if she'll do it. And they did. They asked me if I would run lines with her and be her new dialogue coach. And I was, 22, 21, 20.
Yeah.
So I got thrown to the wolves, literally, the wolf. Mm-hmm. And I started running lines with her. And the second season came about, and I thought, well, if I'm coming back, can I get paid to do this job?
You get paid the first year? Oh my God. Okay. Yeah.
Episodes for nothing because, like I said, I was new and I was not smart. So second season, it was official. I never got a credit on the show, and I still don't. It's the only show I was never credited. But I certainly got a paycheck for it. And that's how it started. I was there for 4 seasons, and I worked my tail off, but it was the most amazing learning experience. And then I managed to keep doing that. So, it's a nice thing to have on the resume that you worked with Roseanne, because it kind of means you can work with anybody. Mm-hmm. And so I kept it up.
But how did you go from that, which is one whole universe, to I call them children's shows, but they're not children, teenagers. I don't know what age you call them. Those.
Oh, you mean kid shows? So I had done a show called Still Standing for 4 seasons.
I remember that. Oh my God. Okay. Yeah.
Amy and Mark Addy. Mm-hmm. There was 4 seasons. It was so much fun. It was a great family. And then the show ended, and one of our producers went to Nickelodeon and was doing a kid show because, production is production. You gotta show it's better than not working. And she called me in, and I worked on, that was True Jackson VP with Keke Palmer.
Oh my God. So can I ask you, you're a little older than me, but not much. So when that era of, I don't know, kids sitcom, like sometimes they're on in the morning, it's hard to, I don't know what the genre would be called, but they didn't exist when I was a child. When that era of show came, it was a whole different beast. But there hadn't been something like it, certainly not to the level that they exist with Disney and Nickelodeon and on Universal, all of that. Was it harder or easier working with, I don't know, minors? Because they're not, they're young, but they're not
So
two.
it was just
Mhm.
different. Because every actor is different, and age to me didn't really make a difference so much. Um, because either somebody is talented and can do the job, or they can't. And I mean, I've worked with, you know, adult actors who have no business doing a job, worked with kids who should be, getting
Mhm.
Oscars. So really, I worked the first time I worked with a kid was on Still Standing, and Soleil I think was 7 years old when we started. She was
Oh,
tiny.
wow. Okay.
Kids just bring their own energy and their own innocence to parts and to
Mhm.
words, and I always loved it. I always loved what a child actor brought to the material on the page. So I never thought of it as, I mean, the hours in general, uh, they split a script. So you have your A story and your B story, and but you never the two shall meet because you got to shoot one while you have the kids, and you got to shoot the other when you don't have the
Right.
kids. So it made your day that much longer. But in general, kids memorize
Wow.
faster.
I would not think
Uh,
this. Okay.
oh man, they have young brains and they learn stuff immediately.
I always think of
Uh,
memory for okay, every actor I know is an adult, obviously. Not every, I knew kid actors, but whatever, now. And so they always talk about memorization becoming like a muscle memory thing. So it was hard when they were like 17, but easier now because they know they have their own method for doing it. And I always assumed kids would have a harder time because they're unfamiliar with all the words, nuance. Like there's so many things about which they're unfamiliar with language that I figure it would be harder. That's so interesting. Yeah.
well, so here's what's really interesting is a lot of these kids, like Charlotte Sanchez on my show on the Connors now. She started when she was what,
Mm-hmm.
4? She couldn't read. A lot of these kids that start when they're tiny can't even read, and so they have to learn the lines by listening to their parents tell them the words.
Oh, oh, right. Yeah.
They're they're memorizing just from hearing the words. And so when you have that muscle, so then when you actually learn to read and you see the words, I think it just happens that much faster. That ability to remember them, to for that, and it is a muscle. It absolutely is a muscle. And when that muscle is flexed, forget about it. These kids learn stuff immediately. And the hard part is actually when the lines change and then they have to tweak it and learn something different.
Mm-hmm. That is actually it's hard for everybody. I know.
Everybody, but sometimes kids will lock in, or certain actors will lock into the words, and to change it up is, it's a
That
process.
seems harder because sitcoms, in from people I know, change way more than dramas, and they have more time to change or more. They're after a punchline, which is not like Law and Order, which is after something completely different. So the punching up part with the constant changes, I know can be difficult. I'll say that.
If they're not happy, I mean, when you have an audience show and you're shooting a show, if the blow, that last joke in the scene doesn't get the reaction the writer wanted, they'll take 5, 10, 15 minutes to pitch and rewrite it, and those words go in, and the actors do something new. And with the pros I work with, it I mean, they do it in seconds. They learn it in seconds. I, there have been times where I've had guest actors and I've had to go in with brand new monologues that are half a page long and teach it to them literally in minutes so that they can go out and do it in front of the audience. And if you don't think that is just heart palpitation inducing.
I can't imagine, like I'm terrified sitting here in my house, like thinking about it, because it's so. There are very few jobs. I mean, it's like brain surgery. There's very few jobs where you immediately have to adjust, and that's it. Like there's not. It's not like, well, maybe tomorrow. There's no space or time for reflection.
No, you're thrown in it, and I mean, a lot of times my job is to help the actor piece together all these words so that they come out in the right order. And it's like, what's the thought process? What's going to lead you to the next word? You know, what is the best way for these words to get in your head in the next few
So
minutes?
let's no time. So then I guess I'll ask you, do you then have to adapt whatever your methodology is for each person you work with?
Yes. I I have a dozen different methods of working with a dozen different actors. I mean, my process with each actor I work with on the show is different. Um, and and it's like that with every actor I work with has a different process, learns differently. I use different skills to work with different actors. It's just and when it's somebody new, it's a learning process. It's like, okay, which one of my tricks is going to work best with this actor?
How long does it take you to figure out what works best with a person? Because each week, I mean,
Uh,
the show moves on. I mean, you know what I mean? It's like, okay, let's go, let's go.
Hours, days. I mean, you work with somebody one day and you get a feel for it. You go in the next day, you're running lines, and you learn pretty quickly. I mean, and the longer you've been doing it, the easier it becomes to figure out what works best for a specific actor. So it's just that's just been experience has helped me hone that. And it all depends on how much time I have with an actor. Sometimes if it's a kid actor and they're in school, I don't have a lot of time to figure out what's going to work. So I just do my normal general and 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 whittle it down from there to what it
Would
has
that
to
be the
be.
same with guest stars or guest actors? Because generally they're only there for that 1 week.
Right, exactly. So I mean, with the Connors now, we literally have 2 days of rehearsal before we start on camera, and guest actors come in and they're like, what, that we've done it twice today and we're done. Oh wait, we've done it twice today and we're done. And the next day, so literally we do each scene twice, two rehearsals and a run through each day, and then we're on camera. So it's not a lot of rehearsal.
Oh my God,
People who are used to rehearsal are like, that's it, we're done. Okay.
some shows have longer rehearsal times. That's all I'm going to say.
Yes.
Some have much longer rehearsal times, and there's a lot more time. And I'll
Yeah.
leave that there.
Most shows have
Mhm.
3 days. In sitcoms, most sitcoms have 3 days. You have your read day and you rehearse, and then you have your producer run through day, your network run through day, and then you get into your two
Mhm.
camera days. And that's the norm for a sitcom. But our read day is not a rehearsal day. We read the show, and the execs go back and rewrite from there, and then we come in on day two for our first rehearsal. So, but we're our show is filled with a bunch of
Well,
pros.
that's true. So
So
you have a different. I mean, you're looking at a long history of people who worked a long time, and it's different. It's just different.
yeah,
It's different. So have you ever worked on a drama then? Because those, though they have, well, okay, most people I know who have dramas have, let's just say 8 days. We're not going to get into the wherewithal and the Friday and all the craziness, but they have 8 days.
right,
So, and they intersperse filming with rehearsal because of, it's like an hour. They got like moving around. There's a lot more going on. It's not completely like a, three camera on set experience.
yeah. I mean, I have not done a drama. I'm trying to think. I I did a movie of the week for 1 or 2 days with Roseanne uh, when she was doing a movie. And this had to be, 25 years ago, 30 years ago. Um, and I only did a couple of days, and then she decided she didn't want anybody. So then I was, um, and it was a lot of
That's
sitting
fair.
around,
Yeah, it's a different.
and I think she ultimately just didn't want to pay somebody to sit around. So, but yeah, no, I've been sitcoms, been in sitcoms for all of it. I'm trying to think. I mean, as an actor, I've done a little bit of everything. Commercials, industrials, film, mostly sitcom. But as a dialogue coach, it's been 99% sitcom.
Wow. Okay, that's okay. Can I ask you this? Do you watch sitcoms? Because I've been thinking about it because I travel a lot, and I've been thinking about streaming services, and it feels like the percentage of sitcoms versus dramas when I was young was very high. And it feels like that number has like switched dramatically, and there are not very few, but there are far fewer.
There are far fewer. You are 100% right. This business is so cyclical. We'll go with, right now we're in a
Mhm.
sitcom lull. There's like hardly happening. And in a few years, they're going to decide that the 1 hours are too expensive, or whatever they're doing is too expensive. And then they're going to go back to sitcom, and something will do well. And so then they'll do more of them because, oh, look, this one's doing well. And it is, you know, right now we're going through a rough time in the sitcom world. Do I watch them? Absolutely. I watch all of my shows. And as I work with people and I know more people, I watch
Mhm.
everything they do. I mean, like or Kiki Palmer, I watch whatever she does. The cast members from all of True Jackson, I will follow them wherever they go and watch whatever they do. The same with my Connors crew. When I have a relationship with people, I will always watch them. So it makes for a lot of
I
television,
don't disagree.
or, or where they go. I mean, I'm watching do Password now because she's just hysterical. I love her. So
I
yeah,
I will
I'm
only say this. What it has led to is me watching many single episodes of many things. Because somebody was asking me something, and they were talking about Community, and I was like, "Oh, I watched an episode my friend was on, but I otherwise have not watched it." So I watch a lot of single episodes of things where I know people are on,
right.
and then yeah, I can't. I find it difficult to commit, but that's because I spend a lot of time writing. So how did you balance? And this is the thing I want to ask you about because it, I've known you to always be working like on set. Not, I mean, I know there's like hiatus. I mean, there's a lot of space and time between when things are on and when they're not. But how did you integrate writing and doing the on set work?
Oh, it was really hard. So I because I started writing in what 2000 2001. I said I couldn't tell you what was I working on then. I don't even know what I was working on then. But so we have
Mm-hmm.
5 months off in our big hiatus, and so I could pump out a book and a half in 5 months. I mean, I could pump out a book every 2 or 3 months. Um, in the old days. And so I would write a book during the hiatus, and then I'd start back on set. I'd work all day on set, and then I'd come home and write for, I don't know, 3, 4, 5
Wow.
hours every night. And I did that for, I don't know, 18 years maybe. And after 18, and keep in mind my daughter's tiny. She was born in 97. So I'm raising my daughter. Um And my husband, God bless him, was so sweet to let me close the office door and type for hours at a time every night, and he baby watched. There were those 3 years where I stayed home with her, so I could write around naps and stuff like that. Um, so yeah, about 2001 is probably when I went back to work on something. That was probably Raising Dad. with Bob Saget and Brie Larson, who is now Miss
Hmm.
Marvel. Anyway, um, so yeah, it was a lot of hours, and I did it for many, many years, and I finally hit a breaking point and said, I I can't do it all, and I'm gonna commit to being on set, um, just for my sanity, because writing wasn't happening for me like I wanted it to. So I took a
So
step
can,
back.
yeah, so I want to
Uh,
ask you this because I was thinking about, well, I was thinking about your career because I was going to talk to you, and you sold to Carina Press back, and I feel like it's the early days of Carina. Well, I don't even know if it exists anymore. I assume it does. But I remember when Harlequin launched that. At the time when it launched, they called it an e-book only imprint. I know that they have made deviations. I mean, that's a different conversation, but what made you submit to them, or was that part of like a bigger process?
um, my
Okay.
agent submitted to them. I never did, and I think they had been up for
Hmm.
about a year. Uh, she submitted to them, and um, I think she was submitting. I don't remember if I knew she was submitting to them because she was just sending it out everywhere. Um, and then they called her, and she called me, and that was actually the second book in the series that they wanted to buy. And I said, "Well, hey, do you want to look at the first book? There is a first book," and they ended up, it was a 2 book deal.
I actually have the exact same thing. I submitted book two because, to be honest, I think it was a better book because I wrote it. You know what I mean? I wrote it later, and I believe they published book two and then published book one. That is my recollection. But I did the same thing. It's like, hey, you know what? I got something else here. The same sort of people. How many? I feel like you did three or four books for Karina.
Karina, and then they wanted something different, and I wasn't ready to let those characters go. So on my own, and started. And I was very happy doing that. So yeah, Karina had the first four, and I was able to narrate three of those four. The first one went to Audible, and they didn't even tell me. They finished the audio book before I was even told. And I said, "Hi, I'm an actor, right? Can I narrate my own books from now on?" So they said, "Well, we're not in charge of that. You got to call Audible," and I did. And uh, they they called me at 7 in the morning, which was 10 in the morning New York time, and said, "Well, you need to audition for it." And I said, "Okay." And they said, "Well, read the first paragraph of this book." And I said, "Okay." And I did. And I got halfway through the first paragraph, and the guy says, "Oh yeah, you can narrate your own book." I'm like,
Well, I mean, on the one hand, that's your profession, and on the other hand, I could see them getting the. It's like people who want to write their own screenplay adaptation, and some people can do it, and some people should not do it.
I agree. I completely agree with you, but I kind of thought having my SAG card would have like tipped the scales a little bit. But auditioning for it, I just wish they'd given me the opportunity for the first book. But it is what it is. I was thrilled to do the three that I did, and a couple more of a friend's book after that. So it
How
was all
did
good.
you like book narration? I was just talking to someone about this because it's something she's considering and she's doing some training. I mean, she's not just going to throw herself in. And we were talking about it. And to be honest, like it's not my skill set. And it seems like it would be daunting. I have to do different voices. I have to get up tomorrow morning, remember who had what voice. And it's not like you're doing a cartoon or
Oh,
some other thing where you're only like a couple of characters. You're all the characters.
hard. Let me tell you, it is hard. My friend's book, she had like
Oh my
55
God.
characters, and I saw that, and I thought, okay, I can do this. I can do this. I can do this. And it's daunting. I mean, I did it. I don't know. I look back now and I'm like, how did I do that? But there's little things that you switch up for each, and you have to mark it in your head. you have to, whether you're making notes or you just have to mark it in your head and know who it is and hear them in your head. Um, and and you do it, and it's hard, and you have a lot of tea and honey, and you have a voice rest when you're done, because it's 5 or 6 or 7 hours in the studio every day talking nonstop.
Yeah. So I admire people who do that. It's just the characters. Like, I mean, if I had to read something, I could do that. And my son recently did some voiceover stuff, and it was just, it was just an intro in reading, an intro for like a film. And I was like, that is easy enough. Like, we were going to practice the words you don't know. We're going to like work that out. We're going to work out your speed and all of that. That is doable. You throw in like some other voices and I'm out. Like, I'm out.
Yeah, it's and I wanted to be prepared, so I read every book. I mean, some people don't. Some people read it for the first time as they're doing it, which I couldn't personally do. So I had to read each book before I did it, and I marked every character with a different color. I mean, I marked my scripts like I do as a dialogue coach, and I mean, I think that job probably helped me with
Mhm.
narrating, uh, in terms of how I prepare my script as a dialogue coach, because I prepared my script as a narrator. Every character was a different color, and I could remember whose voice went with what
And I
color.
will say, so I have had, I don't know, let's say 15 books, audiobooks narrated. I don't know. It may be slightly more, slightly less of the books I've written. And my experience, and these are actually not even up, I replaced them, but my experience with people who read as they go, it ended up being problematic mainly for pronunciation and consistency.
Yeah. Yeah, if there were words that I wasn't sure about, I had to look them up. If there were names, I needed to call the author or an agent or whoever to find out if I'm saying it right. I mean, I did not want to go in not knowing something. And I'm famous for saying you don't know what you don't know, and I don't want to be the person who doesn't know. Uh, but you don't know what you don't know, so it's like, well, you think you're saying something right. I didn't know I wasn't. So if I'm in doubt about anything, I ask the questions because I want to know that I'm doing
Yeah,
this right.
yeah. Because my
So
experience, how you're talking about with Audible, where you didn't know the book was done until it was done. I had that experience with one book, and I remember there was some talk about there being an audiobook, and then one day I wake up and then there's an audiobook like in the whatever, let's call it the rough, in my email. And so this is like 8 hours or 10 hours of listening. And I was like, oh my God, you mispronounced all the locations, all the names. And it became this huge thing to fix. And I was like, that's the only time that ever happened to me. But I was like, the
yeah,
reason I want to do it, like I want to do the first couple chapters as you go along, is because I want to fix it rather than, oh my God, the going back and fixing is a nightmare. At least, yes, because marking the time and all of that was a
right.
nightmare. And then they have to go back and do that same exact thing. But I was thinking about this because there's a group I belong to of readers, and one of the books, it's actually a book called Sandwich. I'm reading it right now. And the biggest complaint was that the narrator mispronounced the names of towns in Massachusetts. I mean, I
Oh,
lived in Massachusetts. I went to college there, and so things are weird, like Worcester, or like in this case, it was Barnstable, which I guess she pronounced Barnstable. Uh, and or when like places in Rhode Island and things like that, and it's for readers, it's very jarring, and they will talk
right.
amongst themselves about
Yeah.
it and maybe tank your book, who knows. But I think that I
Uh,
really appreciated narrators asking questions about pronunciations ahead of time, and those were the most successful experiences I had with narrators and the most successful books I've had.
right. Yeah. I mean, you want a narrator who is as prepared as possible. So I knew nobody was going to read my books like
Mm-hmm.
I could read my books, and especially listening to that first book, it's a race car book. It's fast paced. Now I get that, you can't talk too fast. You have to keep a good speed. But I know a lot of narrators talk really slowly because people can speed up the
Yeah,
you can speed up
especially
the
now.
but but I'm listening to this narrator, like during a race when it's supposed to be white flag, white flag, white flag, and she's like, white flag, white flag, white flag, and I'm like, okay, the race is over, girl, the race
No,
is over.
a sense of urgency would be important.
This is somebody's ear telling them last lap, white flag, and it's like, could you read it any slower? But you know, so stuff like that. I heard that, and I'm just like, no, no, please let me narrate my own books, please, so that I can just have the urgency that it needs for when it's
Wait, I have to
deserved.
ask you now. Did you get paid for reading? Okay.
I did.
Because after the free coaching, I just want to make sure. Because I know
Oh,
let me say this. Yeah.
DJ, who had a SAG card, got
Sad,
paid
right?
her. Got SAG.
I only say this because I know that there is a trend. We'll say this kindly. There is a trend for authors to read their nonfiction books. I have feelings about it because not everybody needs to read their book aloud, especially people with heavy accents. But that's neither here nor there. There's a book she's a very, very heavy, like Boston accent, and I find it very grating, for the whole book. A book about money, oddly. So I think, but I know that talking to authors, some of them have gotten paid and some have not. And the people have not, I think, well, and they don't have SAG cards, so that's a different thing. But they thought it was like a privilege. They're like, oh, they want me to read. And I thought, they made me want to save money.
Yes. So I think a lot of times because if how many authors have their SAG cards? I mean, let's be honest, not as many as you might think. So yeah, I mean, there's no union that says they have to get paid, and it's what you just said. Authors are like, "Oh my gosh, they're going to let me read my book. That's great," and they're happy to do it for free. Which, okay, that's all right too. But if I wasn't in SAG and I had an opportunity to read my book versus not getting paid, I would have jumped at it in a second. So I get that. Especially, when you write a book, that's your heart and soul down there, and you want it to come across the way you want it to come across. Now, I get that some people don't have the ability to do that, and that's fine. They should have to. But the people that do have the ability and want to should have that option.
Yeah, it's an interesting world because when I was younger, nobody read their books unless you were really famous. You know what I mean? So I feel like there's like some 80s Steve Martin book that was read. But other than that, like people generally did not read their books. And now I feel like there's not a nonfiction book that I have come across in the last year or two where the author did not read it. Which has been a huge shift just a huge shift. There's always huge shifts. So do you plan, and I was thinking about this the other day. I don't know how long the counters will last. I mean, TV comes and goes like in a heartbeat, it feels like. Do you plan to continue the dialogue coach work until you can run out the clock on that, I guess?
I would love to. Yes. I would like to keep being on set because I love it. I love working with actors. I love my job. I love my little bit of creativity that I put in. Whether no one knows something on a show is there that is my little bit, I know it's there, and so I love that. And yeah, I mean, I will do it as long as I can. But like we were talking about, it's a weird time right now. Not a lot of sitcoms, so I don't know where my next gig is going to
I
be.
don't. 90% of the people I know don't know where their next gig is going to be.
Yeah, so which is okay because, like I said, I've got a book in my head that I just need to sit down and do it. But I just promised myself that I wouldn't not live life because, all those years were those 18 hours where I was doing everything. I'm talking about watching television and watching this. I did not watch television for 18 years. I mean, I missed all of pop culture for Sex in the City. I'm not one episode or second of that. And there are so many, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, couldn't say that stuff that I probably would love, have no clue. And and after so many years of that, I thought, you know what? I want to enjoy a few hours and watch some television tonight. And so that's why the
So
writing
can I
took a
ask you this,
backseat.
because this is the bane of my existence. So I too did not watch TV for I stopped watching in 96. I know that because I couldn't afford cable, so I got rid of that. And maybe picked up like DVDs of shows. Like so I watched The Sopranos on DVD from Netflix when they, say sent DVDs. But there's a whole 15, 20 years missing, like Sex and the City, all the things you're talking about. And there are so many cultural references. I actually just read a book about, like a nonfiction book about reality television. I literally had heard of zero of the shows. I didn't even know. I was like, there's a show about this, there's a show about that. It was mind blowing. I don't know what rock I
Yeah.
live under. So unless I know somebody who is on a show, and then I know the show exists. Like I know somebody who like cast for Good Girls, or somebody who was on like the L Word, the new one, or actually I know somebody who was on the
Right.
old one. They're the same group of people, but it's just that without that, and I tune into that particular episode of the person who was on like one episode of Community or one episode of whatever it is. I tune into the one thing, and then I don't. Do you think that hiatus from pop culture made writing more difficult? Because it's something I really struggle with, because I don't have, I'm not saying pop culture references in books are good, but there's some nuance missing, that things that have happened and I don't know what people are talking about.
No, I, I agree with you. I totally agree with you. Uh, yes, there's, I'm sure there's things missing, but I reference, you
Mhm.
reference what you know. And so, I'm sure my characters were talking about things that I didn't know about. They're talking about whatever is happening in their world. So it, but no, I think you're right. I think there's probably a lot of things that are missing that could have been there, but you don't think about that when you're working. It's like you're in their world doing their thing, and because you're missing it, they're not missing it because they don't know what they're missing.
That's true. I just think about it. And so now when I write, I actually call or ask people now when I make references, because I feel like the problem I'm having is my references are getting old. And I'm like, I am really struggling. So this is the book I'm writing now. It's the first book. It takes place in 2025 because it's going to be published later. So I have to move it ahead. And I'm really struggling with like, okay, what is currently going on in Los Angeles, in this world, in this thing now? Because I feel like I'm living sometimes in the past. Like I just miss so much. And I don't know, I have a child that only does watch TikTok, so that's not helpful. But it's just, I feel slightly alien from it, but I don't know when I would have time to catch up.
No, I agree. That's a vicious circle right there. That is just a vicious circle that I don't know how I don't know how that gets undone. I mean, you just have to set aside time, I guess, to even if it's watch a little bit of something that made such a splash that you get a taste of it. But I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I one of my books was kind of a flashback to the '80s, and and it was so fun to write because of all the lingo and the language. And I actually just reread it a few months back, and it just made me laugh out loud that I thought, oh my God, I must have had to research these words for this time period. Mondo and all that. That's all the stuff that I missed in the writing is I don't know what I don't know. That's what I
Yeah, it's
missed.
interesting. Well, no, but being on set, then I'm trying to think. Well, sitcoms are so different. Some reference things and some don't. It depends. Some are timeless and some are topical. Do you find being on set, though, keeps you more abreast of things? Because you're around people all the time. And so you have more, like, quote unquote, water cooler talk than I do sitting at home by myself, for sure.
You're 100% right. And especially when I was working at Nickelodeon and all the kids would come in talking about things. It's like, oh, I thank God I'm staying in the loop because, the kids are talking about things or the adults. Everybody here is watching stuff. They're not going home and sitting in front of a computer. That's me. They're having a life. So I'm listening to everything through them. So that definitely did help me. I won't lie about that. And it's different. It's almost like you've got to take time out to, you know, live that
That's
life
true.
so you can write
Yeah.
about it, even if it's
Yeah, I've been thinking about that. I think, how can I say this? I think I have enough life experience to write about how people feel about how things happen in life, but I'm missing some of the life experience of current cultural norms. It's fascinating how it just blows right by.
I'm totally
So
with you on all of that.
if you get time, I don't know, and sit down and write another book, will it be the same subgenre or what are you thinking about?
Um, this book is, yes, it's still going to be suspense. And yes, it's still going to be a romance. But it's a little bit darker than what I've gone, a little bit darker than what I've done. Um, um, the subject matter is definitely much darker. So, uh, yeah, it's going to be a little different for me to walk that line of suspense, and and this subject matter, um but my whole being is about happily ever after, so that's how it's going to end. So I'm okay with the darkness because it's going to have a good happily ever
I
after.
no longer do that. I can't speak to that. So, can I ask you what drew you to suspense as opposed to comedy, historical? I mean, there's like 1,000 subgenres of romance, but what called you to that? Because when you were writing suspense, it wasn't, in my recollection, as popular as it is now. Let me say that.
I just being born and raised on watching Starsky and Hutch and Policewoman and all these cop shows where everybody
Mm-hmm.
had to solve a mystery. And I loved the idea, Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys. I was always all about mystery, and so it just seemed like a natural thing for me. It's like, what can I? What's the mystery? What's going to happen that's going to keep people guessing? And then this is how it wraps up. So it was just my fondness for mystery, and afraid that my comedy chops aren't strong enough to last a whole book. So I just dipped in with the suspense, and I'm good with that.
What is your favorite genre of book generally to read?
Well, lately I've been kind of going all over the map. I've been reading just everything. Um, right now I'm reading woman's fiction from Anne Dano, and it's fantastic. Um, she's this is like her debut novel. But I've been reading biographies, and I've been reading a lot of comedy books, and I've just been reading everything right now and loving it. And for so many years, all I
Mm-hmm.
read was suspense. That I'm happy to read everything right now.
What? Let me say this. So are you reading suspense in addition to the other things as well? Because I feel like what I want to ask you is, have you noticed a change? Because I think that like a lot of the, how can I say this, very established romance authors I know, I remember being at some beach thing a couple of years ago and they're like, I'm going into suspense. And it's happened for two or three authors I know who did not include suspense at all. So they're writing with letters. So instead of like, Joe, it's like JD or whatever. So that's one thing. And I think that has to do with trends and popularity. But have you, if you've read those books, have you noticed a change, I guess, and more suspenseful, darker, more evil, I think? Because I feel
Um,
like romantic suspense, like in the 80s and 90s, was a little more light. I don't want to say lighthearted, you know what I mean? But
I, I I think certain authors write certain things. There are certain authors who I read all their suspense, but then they got so dark that I stopped reading because it was
mm-hmm.
it was too depressing. It was just too dark for me. Um, uh, so I think, and I think a lot of authors stick with their normal, and if they switch up, then they
That's true
change
as well.
pen names. Right. I'm going to be honest. They'll write under a different name because they're writing something different. Um, I know Helen K. Diamond, who I adore, writes these great, um, you know, and she writes suspense and romance, and she's got some great stuff with a lot of comedy in them and family dysfunction and wonderful books. But she's also
I know, I
writing
just read
thrillers
one
now
and somebody
as
told me it was her and I was like, oh, it is. I can't remember the pen name. I read it like last month. That's it. Thank you.
Darby Kane, and she is an auto buy for me. She is unreal, and they're great. And I mean, they're kind of dark, but they're thrillers, and they are just worth every second. They're wonderful. So you write different things, and you know your audience, or you don't know
That's
your
also true.
audience. So you'll sell your books or you won't. But no sense.
No, it does.
Maybe it
It does.
does.
It's just, it is, publishing is always changing. And I watch how people
Is
navigate the change, and everybody does it a little differently.
Yep, I agree. I agree. Some of us take a few steps back, and some people change names, and some people are really good at the constant shifting and moving and doing. So, and that's great. I figure I still have
Wait,
to learn that
this is the
process.
weirdest question. I remember that one of your books used to be on the Connors set. Is it still there? I feel like something happened to it, but I can't
So
remember what it was.
I had a couple of books on set. I think I've had 3 on set total. This season, when I looked at the bookshelf, they're not there, which means when they went into storage and they pulled out a box, they left a box with my book. But they've been so lovely to have my books on the shelf, and they also, when Katie Seagal was in bed reading a book, it was one of my books, one episode, and I just love that lady. She's the sweetest. So yeah, the show's been very good in terms of having my books
What do
on
you
set.
think
So
of that?
yeah,
I don't know.
it was
You're like one of 2 people I know who has done that, and somebody else. It's a different issue, but like, I. It's such a uniquely odd thing.
it is. I mean, authors that opportunity. So that's why, anytime we had a library, I stuck my books in there. Anytime, they had a free library in front of Darlene's house, and my book was in there. So yeah, it's fun. And it was just a kick for me. I don't know that anybody else
Well,
cared,
every
but
so
I
often I'll
enjoyed
say
it.
this. So I'm sitting in Budapest and my son's like, let's just watch this show. And he was like, so and so directed it, the first couple episodes. I don't even know what the show was. And so we're watching it, and then his wife's like art pops up, and I go, "Oh, I get that." And so we're laughing, but it's like 2 people. I'm like, "This is a joke for 4 people. Like, this is not a joke for 4 million people. This is
Yes.
literally like 440 people are like, that's humorous," and everybody else is like, "Whatever."
Yes. I can't tell you how many times we do that on the show. I mean, we have pictures on the refrigerator of people that are,
Right?
important to the people on the show, but nobody else knows. But we don't. It's not about what anybody else knows. It's about what
No,
we're
I
doing
know.
for
It
our
just it
family,
just made
our
me
set.
laugh, and I was talking to my son. I was like, "This is what I would say. This him growing up here. It's a very unique experience because it's not like all of the other kids he knows, like in the camp and like in Europe, are not like, hey, I just saw so and so's like art.
Yeah.
It's a very small, like tiny Easter egg, tiny.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's when my daughter was growing up and she was on set with us, it's like most kids didn't, if they're not actors, they don't have this experience of being on set with all of these, with all of these people in
Yeah,
this
I
in
will say
this
this.
world.
This is actually funny. So at some point, my son was in school. They were reading a book, some book. I don't even remember the book. And the kid was like, "When I grow up, I want to go to Hollywood." And so all the kids in their class are like, "But why does he want to come here?" They're like, "Are they going to walk? He's going to walk down the street. Like, what is he doing?" And it was the first time I realized that Hollywood is a concept they didn't understand because they were in it. And I was like, okay, so how your mom's like on
Right.
this show? That's Hollywood. Like, it took years for them to integrate the knowledge that the entertainment industry was a thing that was bigger than what their parents did.
Right. Yeah. It's, yeah, people that don't know it, it's just this ideal. It's this thing that's bigger than life. And then you get here and it's
It's
just
just a
Hollywood.
job. So I want to thank you so much for taking the time out to talk to me today, despite your internet problems, which I have so many thoughts about.
I was nervous that this wasn't going to happen. So, but thank you for having me.
No,
This
it
was
was so
lovely.
great to talk to you because what I will say about this podcast is that for all the conversations I have with people, I don't think I ever ask people those in-depth origin questions. I feel like we're always like in some writing capacity, and that's the thing we talk about. Although I was thinking about it today, there was a time we drove in the rain to Orange County. So there's that. I don't know what we talked about is surviving the rain. It was really bad. But other than that, I don't think I get the chance to ask these questions. And I find them fascinating, and listeners find them fascinating, because I think it's sort of like the idea of people's origin story. And it's something that generally we don't talk about because we're simply talking about the current work.
Right. Right. Well, and mine was such a fluke. Life is all about luck and timing most of the time, and that's all it was with me. It was luck and timing. And a little bit of idiocy.
No, but
that
it
never
blossomed an entire career that is fairly unique.
It was a career that I never realized was something that could happen. So yeah,
thank you
definitely.
so much for sharing that and your experience with us, and I appreciate it.
Well, you're so welcome, and thank you for having me again. I had a great time.
This has been A Time to Thrill with me, your host, author Aime Austin. If you enjoyed today's episode, I hope you share, rate, and leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. It will help others find and enjoy my conversations with brilliant women creators. Also, please hit the subscribe button on your podcast app. In addition to hosting this podcast, I'm the author of the Nicole Long series of legal thrillers. The first 4 books in the Nicole Long series are now live. You can download Outcry Witness, Major Crimes, Without Consent, and The Murders Began to your e-reader right now. I'm also the author of the Casey Court series of legal thrillers. These titles are available wherever books are sold, your local library, and also an audiobook. My next book, His Last Mistress, is available for pre-order wherever you get your books. You can also follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Legal Thriller Author. You can find me on TikTok at Social Thriller Author. You can also find this podcast on Facebook at A Time to Thrill. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back with you soon with more great conversations.